Social media and public service. What does that make you think of when you hear social media and public service? Recently, I spoke about a public library. We're talking also about the garbage pickup, maybe the police, fire truck. I've got a couple more public service focused podcasts coming up soon in the future. This was a fun conversation about roads, bridges. Well, not so fun about natural disasters, but we talk about how they can be implemented in a social media strategy and how a province in Canada interacts with their public. This time I speak with Russel Lolacher. He runs a team of 11 in the web and social media services. Last fall of 2021, his team got 23 million views of streets and rows on social media within 3 weeks. He's only got a population of 3.5 million, 23 million views of streets and roads. How did they do that? That's what we talk about. We talk a little bit about the role of Flickr in 2022. Do you even remember Flickr? Do you have a Flickr account? Yeah, it's still a thing. We'll talk a little bit in depth about content marketing, the role of content marketing, evergreen materials, how that can be really important and helpful in communicating with the public or with your customers. Russell lives in Victoria, British Columbia. If you don't know where that is, think the really far left side of Canada. In 2021, there were disastrous floods, which took out most roads and access for people there. Many livelihoods were completely uprooted. Russell manages a team which has been together for over 10 years. Imagine that. His team know work crews. They know who's out doing the work. They are connected with them. They get updates directly firsthand from the field. And then they can share those with their social public. Those social accounts are all in the notes here below, so check out any of the links. Others might learn a couple of things from them just by looking at some of the techniques they use. I hope you can take something away from this podcast. We also talk about getting a stolen Instagram account back. Oops. So let's get over to Russel Lolacher, Director of Web and Social Media Services for the British Columbia Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, and also podcast host of Relationships at Work. How did you increase foot traffic to Hoyne Beer by 20%?
Oh, you are going back a ways, sir. So Hoyne was a craft brewery that had just started in my small city of Victoria, BC. And I was looking for a little bit of experience doing private sector social media. We're going back about over a decade maybe now. And most of my experience had been in the public sector. So I was looking, okay, I'll do pro bono work even. I actually offered to do it, met with the brewer himself, a really nice man, Sean Hoyne. And what had happened was they had a new beer called Dark Matter that was being released. And they were open only one day out of the week because they were brewing the rest of the time. So they had their storefront open only one day on the Friday. And for whatever reason, they decided to go, we're gonna release this on the Thursday because it's special. But they just did that as a matter of, we're just gonna do this operationally, not from a marketing standpoint. And I'm like, let me get this straight. And there was already starting to be a growing buzz around this small brewery. I'm like, you're going to secretly release this a day before to only, it'll be released in stores on the Friday, and it'll be usually on Friday in the store, but they're going to do it a day early, and you're not telling anybody. My job just got way freaking easier. So I had taken over their social media accounts and noticed who had started, bragging and talking and really being sort of beer nerds around Hoyne. So I started letting them know that this beer was going to be released for the first time ever, only released in brewery the day before. You have to be here in Victoria. We are a ferry ride and about an hour drive away from Vancouver, much bigger center. And so I just started having conversations with people going, shh, there's this secret thing we're doing. If you want to take advantage of it, you got to get here on Thursday between blah and blah. And then I just talked with people through the week. I shared anybody that was taking the ferry over just to come over for this beer. I basically became part of the beer loving community who are already kind of fans, and just amped up their fandom and gave them this exclusivity that didn't really exist in that moment. They only told me a week out before the event was happening, so I did not have a lot of space to get this going. But yeah, that was basically what happened. Was they opened on the Thursday, never had before, and it was about 20-30% more that day than they had ever gotten before.
So this is a dozen years ago, and nowadays you would call that influencer marketing. We didn't call it back then.
Yeah. Beer nerds, influencers. Yes, correct.
The beer nerds are pretty easy to influence with, hey, there's a exclusive beer coming out on Thursday, right?
Exactly. But organically, like there wasn't this, I'm going to reach out to this select community. I'm 3 months in advance of the launch and blah, blah, blah. It was literally like, listen, guerrilla marketing, get out there, be in the conversations already happening, start a few while you can. It was organic. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
But those same techniques would work today. So a small business,
absolutely.
let's take it small, like your Hoyne beer, right? You take a small business who might release something, or they're going to have something on the showcase. They could easily go into their communication, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, wherever it might be, and find a few people and try to drum it up without a lot of budget, couldn't they?
They could. I wouldn't say it's easily. I think the problem is you have to know your community well. You have to know your market well. You have to know your brand identity well. Because I was able to have conversations based on the tone I understood the brand to have, which allowed me to do this. I think you need to understand where you fit sort of in the marketplace. Well, what's your differentiator? In this opportunity, I had this just this very interesting craft beer that already had a bit of a legacy. Sean is kind of the brewer is kind of a well-known, lesser celebrity, I guess, in town, but he's a big known within the beer community. So, but I leveraged that. Like, it was just the self-awareness has to be huge in order to pull stuff like this off. And thankfully, I had access to Sean. I had access to his wife who was running the show. So I really got a really good sense of who they were. So I knew how to package and market that. And then I understood the community really well. So it's not, is it easy? Is it hard? It's all in the eye of the beholder. But yeah, it does take some effort.
You and I last interviewed February of 2013.
Old
news, but interesting enough, you've been with the same organization the entire time and a little bit longer. Back then, we were talking a whole lot about customer experience. That was the big thing on Twitter. I think we started in 2010 with many others. Still is. Unfortunately, not a lot has changed or improved. But what for you has changed in those last 9 years?
I think the biggest thing that's changed is public expectations. I think the public has a very high opinion of how brands should be showing up. And I mean this in the public sector, private sector, media, of how they show up online. And the bar is very high. Also, a lot more people are online and a lot more active and a lot more vocal than there were. People will set up Twitter accounts now with 3 followers just so they can be really angry about something. It's just the public expectation is you will engage, you will answer their questions, you will be accessible, you will be transparent, you will be all the things they want when they want it. So if brands aren't able to step that up, they're already missing the expectations of the public. My favorite was I was doing a presentation once, and I had an executive ask me if the expectations of the public were realistic. And my answer was, it doesn't matter if it's realistic or not. You're either meeting them or you're not. And I think that kind of opened a few eyes, is that it's not your game to play, it's their game to play. You just have to rise to the occasion and not think success comes from lack of effort, because it doesn't. You have to get in there. You have to be available. You have to engage. You have to create content they actually give a shit about. I think if anything's changed, it's really the growing public expectation.
So I reached out to you, I guess, a month ago because I got a weird DM from you on Instagram that said, "Hello, how are you doing?" And we hadn't exchanged DMs for nearly a decade. Your Instagram was hijacked or stolen, or how you might describe it there. This is a bit off of our normal topic here, but I thought it was relevant because this can happen to obviously anybody. What was that experience like?
Well, I'll tell you, Andrew, I talked to a lot more ex-girlfriends in those 3 days than I have talked to in a very long time. Yeah, so somebody hacked my Instagram account. I have two. I have the relationships at work Instagram account, my personal one. It was my personal one that they hacked. And they were able to get other people use it. So they pretended to be me. And by doing so, they were able to recruit other people and get them to click links so they could be further hacked. What had happened was the hacker had pretended to be a friend of mine and had asked me to help support some influencer or ambassadorship, which wasn't out of the realm of different for this particular friend or acquaintance of mine. So I'm a nice guy. I'm here to help and support. Sure, I'll click your little link. Click. Hacked. Quickly learning that he had been hacked, quickly learning that other people I knew had been hacked. Suddenly my Instagram account was a Bitcoin bro piece of shit where people are suddenly, and that's thankfully a lot of people know me well enough to go, what the hell happened, man? You're suddenly a Bitcoin guy? I'm like, no, I am not. I am not a Bitcoin, like just the aggressiveness. So anyway, that was frustrating because I have a presence through that account. It's very personal for me. It's my own. So to have somebody else pretending to be me, recruiting and taking advantage of my friends based on my relationships with them, it hit hard. It was really, really frustrating. So I had to go through that. It was really stressful for a couple of days.
Well, fortunately, I was connected with you on Twitter as well. And that was, I don't know why, but I went straight over to Twitter to look you up, and I could see you were posting, and your Twitter was still you. And you were like, if you see anything from me on Instagram, do not click, do not follow. It's not me. And you had put out a lot of information, so that it popped up quite quickly when I looked for that. And I wrote to you on Twitter as I got this weird message, and you're like, don't touch it, don't touch it. So I backed off and waited. But pretty quickly you got it back. How was that?
Frustrating. Instagram does not make it easy. Their customer service is not what you would say customer service is. What had happened was I went through their process. There is this ability to, if you have an account where your face is on it, if there are selfies, they can use that for facial recognition. So you will go through and say, forgot my account or whatever. You click the buttons and it will give you an opportunity to reclaim your account by doing this little facial thing where you rotate your face up, down, left, right. And you keep doing it until the sensor or whatever goes, okay, I got a good look at your face. They will then within, it's not horrible. It was within 12 hours where they'll come back and re-give you access to your account if they feel like, yes, you match up. I had to do it 3 times before it finally clicked through. There was an opportunity where I did finally get through. I went in, there's an Instagram security checkup page where it's just like a quick password, email, like you check the phone number, check those first. So I went in there immediately, rechanged them back to my own personal stuff, got out, went to bed, got up the next morning, and the hacker had rehacked my account. He actually messaged me on my other Instagram account because he knew that was me and said, hi, like he literally taunted me with a waving emoji of like, hi, you tried, but sorry, fucker, I gotcha. It was so infuriating. Wow. And then he would tweet like, do you want your account back? So he was going down the path of extortion as well. I didn't engage. I just doubled down and talked to some pretty smart people, much smarter than me about security, and went down that path.
All right. Well, if you go and look up Russel Lolacher on Instagram, at least today, while we're recording this, no promise when this is released in 10 days, that's him behind the face on his Instagram account.
It will be me in 10 days, and I can't stress enough to get two-factor authentication.
That's it.
Please get two-factor authentication, and make sure you remove anybody else's I don't identify as you under two-factor authentication. That's how they were able to rehack me, is they had their own 2FA in there still when I got re-access again.
So let's bring it back to work a little bit here. November of last year, a woman named Jessica, don't need to name her here, but she tweeted at your business account, or the Tran BC for British Columbia account last November, saying, quote, social has become a critical communications tool and is a part of our public infrastructure. This work is important, exclamation point, end of quote. Can you explain a little bit of what happened, and more so, what was the role of your social public service, and how has that changed in the 10 years you've been working there?
What had happened was November 13th, November 14th of 2021, British Columbia had the biggest flooding event in 2,000 years. I've even heard 1 in 5,000 years. And in that time, every highway going from the interior to Vancouver was cut off. You had no access to the lower mainland, which is Vancouver and the municipalities around it. There were issues even on the island itself, which is where I am at. The highway had washed away there as well. It was called the Atmospheric River event, and literally you couldn't go anywhere. So our goods were cut off. Any commuting to work was cut off. There was no ability to move around the province. So I work for the Ministry of Transportation, and we are really good at emergencies. The reason is because we're always dealing with closures, whether we're controlling avalanche paths or there's been an incident with a vehicle crash or whatever. There are closures happening and reopening happenings quite frequently. That's just part of our world. So this was that on steroids. Like, it was just the principles in place for us are all very much the same. It's just longer length of time, more work to reestablish connections. It was just a much, 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 much bigger event. Having said that, my team operates Tran BC, and Drive BC is also an account that we work with. In that time, we are known as a customer service channel. We are a service to the public. We are known, and in 11 years, which is how long I've been in this director role, we have established ourselves as a resource for helping people get home, not get home, context, education. And emergency communications is a cornerstone of what we do, So having said that, we knew that we had to be on it. So we worked quickly, not only to let people know the events that were happening, but getting content out immediately to get context, because people can understand the roads closed. They can't understand how long it's going to be closed if they don't see a bit of context. So I've spent the last 11 years building unbelievable relationships with the brilliant people within my organization, because I live in Victoria, which is kind of far away from a lot of where these other events are happening. So I have to have amazingly good relationships with people in the field, so they understand the importance of getting me a photo, a video within 5 minutes, not 3 hours, not the next day, right now. It doesn't have to be edited. Let me worry about that. Just get me the information, get me a photo and a video. We immediately set up a Flickr account. Yep, we got a Flickr album. Remember Flickr? But it was it's one of the most influential things you can do, because it shows the story. It shows not only the holy crap destruction. When you say something's closed and they're like, sure, yeah, but when it's going to open, we're like 6 weeks, or like, yeah, whatever, 6 weeks. And then you show them a picture, like, oh yeah, take your time. I get it. Totally understand. So we had a photo album not only showing the destruction, but also the recovery, how quickly we were able to get out there, how quickly we were able to reestablish connections on some of those routes, how quickly we were able to help people across temporary bridges and so forth. We had 23 million views on those photos in 3 weeks. Now, understand, the population of British Columbia is about 3.5 million. So globally, we were getting a lot of love very, very quickly. But we had to have that information. We had to have those photos. And then from the moment I got up to the moment I went to bed, me and my team were engaging with every question, every comment, every critical bit of feedback, everything. The mountain, we went up, actually I looked, and our engagement went up 2,600% in 3 weeks from what we were. I was tweeting 300, just on Twitter, about 300 times a day, not only in getting information out, but in response. So we were a customer service platform, for lack of a better term, because we were a public engagement platform, but we do that already. Yeah. So the good thing is that we already had the public trust in establishing us as a resource, not only for the public, but for the media as well, and working with our stakeholders, other industry partners, our traditional news release group, and so forth, to get that information out quickly, timely, and when people needed it and as they needed it. So it was intense, man, but it was unbelievably, probably one of the more rewarding and impactful things I've done. We've been through a lot of emergencies. That's probably one of the biggest ones I've handled. And the outpouring and appreciation from the public was so appreciative. It wasn't just the social media team. It was also just the work our crews were doing out in the field and on those highways, that my team collected a lot of those kudos and put it in a love letter to them on Valentine's Day, because they don't hear those kudos barely at all, right? I mean, people are much more apt, and this is in any industry, to talk about critical issues rather than praise. So we packaged it all up with a pretty little bow and shared it back with our entire ministry to go, look, people are seeing you. They're paying attention to the work you do, and they appreciate you. And that was really impactful as well.
Well, it's also something you've been building for a decade, right? So you've learned from previous roles you've had before this, but how to do that. But you mentioned two things. One, everybody goes on Twitter and can set up an account today with 3 followers and start complaining. So you've got those who are going to come in and complain along the way. But what you mentioned about Flickr, the problem with social media, most of our social media, is it's that moment, right? That picture goes by, and 3 seconds later, if you try to find it, it's gone unless you remember the account. And having evergreen, having a place to put, and you mentioned this, context into it there, and showing the bridge that was gone, 3 weeks ago, and now you see pylons or something coming up next to that picture, and it's showing 3 weeks later, there's progress. And that person who's frustrated and mad and they can't get their product to market or whatever they're trying to do, will see, okay, I can see it in context. Just seeing a picture of pylons coming out of the water is not helpful without knowing what's happened over the last few weeks. And I think that's a really smart one. I'm in Florida, Central Florida today. I come from New Orleans in Louisiana, where we always deal with hurricanes and that kind of bad weather. And last September, we had a very large hurricane where we lost power to the whole city of New Orleans for 10 days. Very hard to understand the context of what you talk about those crews who are out there working day and night. There were crews coming in from states all around trying to help rebuild the infrastructure there. How do you share that context on social media? I think that's Flickr. It might be 14 years old, still relevant today.
It's not only sharing information don't get me wrong, when I got a photo or a video, it went out on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, as it happened. And then it was also collected within a Flickr album to tell the full story. So it was, here's what you need to know because here's what's happening right now. But if you want the story of this event, and we would market the Flickr account or the Flickr album to go, here's what it is, and here's how we're working along. And it was great for the media because then they could go back in and find our photos were everywhere because we gave them a one-stop shop to give context, while also serving those people that needed to know information as it was happening that way as well. But don't get me wrong, it is vital to have those crews understand that their work to reestablish connection on those highways is vital, but it's also vital for somebody to take a photo and give it to me to tell the story of the work they're doing, because then people aren't trying to drive up to that pylon and go, why can't I get through? Because that information is getting out to the people that need it so that they can say, stay home. They can say, drive with care and safety. So it provides much more detail and context so people understand what they need to do to stay safe.
Do those crews send you any photos and videos themselves? Because they're on the front line, right?
Everybody does. Yeah. And I'll either get it from, say, our avalanche crews are suddenly up in a helicopter taking photos, or a drone footage, whatever. I've spent the decades of change management and culture change of selling, to be blunt, selling internally what we do and the benefit to them of what we do. Less phone calls. They don't have to tell the story because the media already has it.
Yep.
So I've built enough of a reputation and a relationship, my whole team has, that they know whether they're the one out there with the shovel or the paving machine,
right,
or they're the executive director. They know they need to get me the information and quickly so that I can share it out.
It's a fantastic story. I mean, it's a sad and tragic story of what happened to many people out there and the troubles that were there, but it's really an enlightening story to hear that social media is not just for complaining and for frivolous things out there. It can be an integral part of communication strategy today.
And don't get me wrong, I have no problem with somebody setting up an account with 3 followers to voice their concerns. It's a platform for everybody. The thing is that it's just organizations have to understand that there are more and more people out there that you're going to have to answer their questions or correct the misinformation that they may have been getting and need to understand that is needing clarity. This is why we do what we do. This is why we made that decision. You have to back up what you do because you're not going to build that public trust. You're just going to be a sounding board for people that have their own agendas, or they're misinformed, or they have their own opinions. That's just serving the public in a nutshell.
So that's a great segue. So I'm going to play you a short excerpt of our interview from 2013, which I have not teed up with you here, and I hope this comes through. And then I have a question for you afterwards. Do you think companies today are going to pay attention and realize that they need to offer a really good customer service?
They just have to. Unfortunately, what they may not realize is that though their customers might not be on, say, Twitter, Facebook, or any online properties, but at the same time, people aren't necessarily on those networks, but they do use Google. And there are websites like Yelp, for example, or other review sites where your search results around your business are being impacted by what that one person said that one time and that you've not paid any attention to, not addressed. So it just sits there and it festers and it doesn't help you get new business. And you may, if you're not paying attention, do not know how to address those negative reviews or those negative comments. Companies have never been part of the conversation, and those conversations are happening and have been happening forever. What they have to understand is the value of being in those conversations. It's like not being the cool kid at the party, because if you don't go to the party, you don't know what's going on, and then you can't feel included. And I think companies need to humanize themselves a lot more and thinking about it in human terms, a lot less in them versus us terms.
So how does that transfer to 2022? I think it's absolute relevant still today, and also to your public social service.
Andrew, I'm timeless, man. That is exactly the same
Evergreen
information I give now. I don't care if you're government. I don't care if you are Joe Blow Brewery Company. People are engaged, whether you are or not. They are out there talking about your industry, talking about your organization, talking about what you have influence over or not influence over, what you're doing, what you're not doing. These conversations are happening. For me, when it comes to the public service, it is people have lower expectations of public service, and not in a good way. I mean that in a way that they expect better from the private sector. So if you are even halfway decent as a public service on social media, like, oh my God, that was fast. Really? You listened? That's one of the biggest feedbacks we get is on social media, is just their shock and awe that I would even engage with them as a social account, much less be human, much less be listening to their critical feedback and go, thank you for letting us know. We will share that with the district and the region, your feedback. And we do all the time, even if we don't have an answer for them, even if we don't have something for them that goes, we're listening and we're going to change everything based on this one comment, I at least will share it with those that are impacted and go, here's what people are saying. Here's what somebody suggests. That's dialogue. That's valuing the content and the conversation out there. Because I did a presentation years and years ago, a decade, probably about the same time as that audio clip. And I asked a bunch of project managers how much they must hate it when misinformation is out there about their projects. And they're like, oh, we hate it. I'm like, guess whose fault that is? Yours. Didn't go over real well. But at the end of the day, it just reinforces what I said, is that if you're not part of the conversation, then they're leading it. The public is leading that conversation. The stakeholders are leading the conversation. You're not involved. You can't just cross your arms and be huffy that people don't understand you. You have to be out in the conversation. You have to go to the cool kid party. Sorry. You have to try to be, you don't have to be one of the cool kids, but you sure as hell have to be useful and helpful and be the one people know. Oh, did you want to talk about the topic? Well, Russell over there, he's an expert on it. You really need to talk to him. That's what you need to establish yourself at. So no, I'm doubling down on what I said, man. Nothing's changed.
It's good and sad, but you talked about giving the feedback to the the relevant offices, departments, and so forth. Has that always been accepted from them, or is that something they've had to learn? I mean, I'm sure you're going to hand a tweet over, I'm just saying a tweet, to somebody that's in this road construction department over there, and they've got a suggestion for something. I'm guessing 10 years ago, they were going to look at that and say, who are you? What is this all about?
No, not really. I think there's been a learning curve, I'm sure, changing from traditional communications where it was about an email that they had to respond to in 6 weeks as opposed to in 15 minutes, whatever they did 10 years ago or 11, 12, 15 years ago. No, I mean, thankfully, my organization is very customer centric and always really has been.
Okay. It's
always been very understanding that the public is our client. We serve them. It's just the culture change of the immediacy, the culture change of another platform or multiple platforms. It was just a learning curve, much like any organization would learn, and treating it as a valuable platform as much as a phone call or as much as an email. Just understanding the immediacy as well of how quickly we need to respond, because that's the nature of social. I would say I think it's more what they've gotten used to is more the volume of what I've had to provide. I'm not a jerk. I'm not giving them like 15 or 1,000 emails a day of like, here's all the things, but I might theme things. We also do an issues summary at the end of the week, which sort of goes, here's what the public has been concerned about. Maybe you should pay attention to this or put this on your radar or so forth. So we do it in real time with those that are impacted. And at the end of the week, we sort of collect those and share that with senior leadership, share that with executive, share that with, a wider decision-making group so that they have an idea of what's on their radar. If it needs to be told to them immediately, they're told immediately. If it can be just sort of like here's some themes you need to know, then it can also be packaged into our weekly rundown.
So those who don't know Russell, and he's, as you've heard through the interview so far, he's been doing this for a long time, also in public social media. He's got a talk coming up in a couple weeks' time. So this episode will be released on Monday, right before an event in Dallas, Texas. It's the 2022 Government Social Media Conference. I mean, that title is just really exciting, I must say. But your talk itself is building trust through social media. I think you've already talked quite a bit about this here. Tell us a little bit about what is that about, but also how does a government organization build trust? So,
yeah, thank you. I'm really looking forward to that. I've had the pleasure of speaking at quite a few conferences now, and especially around this particular topic. And I love it because I love this topic. And I don't know if it gets talked about enough. So in a nutshell, what a lot of public agencies don't seem to understand is that people already don't trust them before they've even opened their mouth. There's a thing called the Edelman Trust Barometer that's been around for 15 years longer, where they measure globally the trust of the public when it comes to media, businesses, government, and non-government organizations. And it's a roller coaster, man, over the years of trust. But mostly the trust in government agencies is always low. It's always right away, we don't trust you because you're government people. Even the lowest trusted role of all roles is government officials.
Oh,
So
I would have thought it's
talk,
like insurance salesmen.
no, journalists are number two. And I'm not making that, this is all in the Edelman. You can Google this stuff. So what public agencies need to understand is that you already are talking about things that people don't trust coming out of your mouth because they're either associating with political reasons or promotional reasons. They don't necessarily see you as somebody for them. They see you talking at them, not with them. So public trust is essential, especially during emergencies, especially during events, or if you're trying to get the public to adopt new policies. It has to come from a place of trust, not from a place of pushing it out there. So I've long invested our time into building public trust because people treat trust like it's something special. Like it's like, once I walk through those doors of my organization, I need to understand what public trust is. It's the same damn thing you do with your best friend, your wife, your husband, your friends. Trust is trust. You just have to do the things that build it. You have to look at it from the human perspective, not from the this is what we need to tell them perspective. So it is really embracing that human factor. And how do you do that? It's by being helpful, man. It's by being the person that is there. I use it as an example of, do you want to be the friend that helps move their couch when they're moving? Or do you want to be the friend that only calls them when they need something? Because that's really the difference here. Are you the organization that is there to answer their questions, correct misinformation, provide context, provide education around issues they may or may not know much about? Or are you the organization that goes, we're awesome, we're awesome, we're awesome. Did I mention we're awesome? We're awesome, we're awesome. Did I mention we're awesome? Or this is important. Did I mention it's important? It's important to us, so it needs to be important to you. That's one way communication, and that's called broadcasting, not engagement. So organizations, all organizations, this is not public sector specific. It's just public sector seems to be a little slower at adopting some of these than other agencies. So yeah, public trust is essential, and it's much more about, I like to call operational communications, which is you show up 365 days a year. It is a service, not a media channel. It is something you do to interact, not something you blast at people. So you have to understand the difference. If public trust is important to you, you have to go down this route.
And it's interesting because you work with I would describe, this is my words, not yours, a relatively dry subject matter, transportation and infrastructure, right? It doesn't seem like something sexy like underwear and lingerie or something here, but infrastructure, whether that's telecommunications, which I'm hugely dependent on at the moment because we're on a Zoom call trying to do this interview from Florida across the whole continent to, I've heard it's called the Best Coast out there in Vancouver. Without infrastructure and roads and methods to get whatever it is from A to B, people are stuck. When people are writing on social media and maybe aiming it at something infrastructure, roads like, and you see these things, context is hugely challenging. We know this on any kind of social media or any kind of, I get it when I get a short WhatsApp message from one of my sons and it's like 4 words and I'm confused for the next 10 minutes. It's like, do I need to show up in a car? Do I need to send money? Should I congratulate the person? Because I'm not really sure what's going on around there. How do you, when you broadcast or when you share pieces of information which could be useful and relevant to that subset of the citizens out there, but you get plenty of messages coming in, and I don't mean the emergency ones in a flood. How do you obtain the context? How do you know, or is it just through muscle memory you've learned how to react to those types of comments and questions coming in from the public?
Those comments and questions, sorry, a little bit of clarity here. The comments and questions that are negative, the comments and questions that are critical, what do you mean?
It could be critical. Right. It could be, again, this week, the left lane, is not available and we're backed up or something. I'm
sure.
making that up because we see this on any road, wherever you might be in the world.
So it's essential for my team. So I have a team of about 3 that manages the social side of things. It's one of the many, many different things they do. But I've established that each of them is in charge of a platform. Each of them is in charge of a portfolio. And each of them is in charge of a region. So we are not a call center where people are interchangeable, right? It is about relationships for us. So say, for instance, Neil, who is in charge of our Twitter platform. He is the community manager for Twitter. He also has certain business areas in his portfolio, like our commercial vehicle safety enforcement group, which is basically like the police for commercial vehicles, or a certain sector of engineering or active transportation. Like that is, so if there's a question around that, he's the go-to guy because he has the contacts within those organizations. He's also in charge of a particular region. For us, it's the South Coast region. So Vancouver, Victoria. So it's so relationship heavy. So I know if I go to Neil and it's in those areas, he can go out there and go, I know the right person to talk to. I know the person that will get us the information as quickly as possible. But he also is the one building the relationships on Twitter. So he's running Twitter. So he knows Steve messaged him 3 weeks ago going, oh yeah, Steve. Okay, so Steve had an issue with this. I need to circle back with him because we've actually fixed this now 3 weeks later. So I need to go back to let him know that we did it. Again, all relationship heavy. We can't just go, yeah, we'll get to that, and then never talk to them again. We also need to circle back every once in a while to go, I just want to tie a bow on this and let you know we heard you. And sometimes we can do stuff and sometimes we can't. And in this case, we were able to do blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So it's all relationship based. If people are looking for particular issues around an area, and this just came up recently where there was a person that was concerned over where a particular sign was on the side of the road. And it had gotten moved and they were pissed as to why it was moved there, how it impacted them, and all the reasons it impacted them and why they felt it inspired road rage. And they were quite adamant about their frustration with it. Neil actually worked with our traffic engineer and goes, thank you for the information. I've talked to my traffic engineer, and then provided a series of tweets. I think there was 4 of them that provided the reasons why that particular sign had been moved and the context of why and some of the challenges it actually had fixed by moving that sign. That person's tone, 180-degree change. It was like, oh, hey, thank you so much for getting back to me so fast. And thank you for letting me know why you did what you did. Really appreciate it. So they were listened to, they were considered. We showed what effort we did to educate them. We didn't move the sign back. We just let them know why we moved the sign in the first place. And the tone changes so quickly when you listen to people and value what they're saying. And she was really frustrated and calling us paper pushers and stuff. Like that's some of the nicer language we've gotten, but still you could see her frustration. And we're like, you know what, just because it's negative doesn't mean we don't engage. So that's how we look at it.
All right. That means that this is not an easy task to learn. Those people you have working in your team are learning. It's experience over time here. So this is not somebody, like you said, this is not a call center where you've got somebody coming in for a 3-hour shift from university and doing Twitter for 3 hours in the afternoon. That's not happening here, right?
No. And keep in mind, my team has been around for 11 years. Even though I've been around for 11 years, I've had the same team for 11 years. So they have a lot of knowledge. They have a lot of context built in. They have a lot of process understanding. They're amazing, phenomenal. I couldn't do what I do without them. They lead the way when it comes to this engagement in the relationships, and their ideas and their creativity has been a cornerstone of our success. So they are essential because it's about relationships. So it's not only my relationship with them, it's the relationship they have with the public we serve and understanding. And this is where I think the team has been seeing the value in their work has been astronomically essential, I think, in the retention, but also in them seeing the value in what they do. It's just seeing the value of that connection and the immediacy of, I listened, I helped somebody. Wow, what I do matters.
I don't know of many teams that are solely or partially responsible for social media interactions with public or customers or whatever it is that can be maintained over an 11-year period. That seems pretty unique and might speak to a lot of different qualities, which is a different podcast we should do. I think you have a podcast that talks about that, by the way. Last thing I want to ask you about is about content marketing. This is something you write about, you talk about, and content marketing in a public service arena. I think content, one might understand what it is, but first off, maybe a definition from your side. How do you describe what is content marketing?
My view of content marketing is creating content the public wants, creating content the public can see value in, and definitely seeing it from a customer-centric standpoint rather than a organizational-centric standpoint. Now, when I say value of content, that value can be many different things. It could be educational, it could be entertainment, it could be anything, but at least it needs to provide value to your particular audience. I say that with my particular audience is traveling British Columbians, but that can be segmented into so many different things like commuters, commercial truck drivers, tourists. But there's so many different ecological interests. We have a lot of green content that we create. So we use it a lot to educate. But we also, when we do entertaining things, like we do something on April Fools or we do something on Halloween, for instance, we have highway cams all over the province, which is fantastic. There's like 400 different ways of looking, 800 ways actually, 400 cameras, but 800 views of our different roadways. So we've done things where we've had like witches being caught on them on Halloween or ghouls standing in front. Now it's entertaining and it's fun on Halloween, but what it's doing is just highlighting our highway cams program. It's not about, it's as much about look how cool and quirky we are, but also highlighting a program that you may not be as familiar with. So we're packaging that customer centricity with highlighting a program that we want to have legs beyond that particular piece of content.
So we've talked up to now, we've been talking about responding to the public. We've been to events, floods, and so forth. Content marketing is more proactive in a sense. It's things you create, you curate on a certain time period, and it could be equally informative. And it could tell them there's going to be a bridge going to be out next week, that kind of content. What do you feel the relationship is between the content marketing and the interaction that's happening on social media? How much content marketing, or what role does content marketing play for you?
Integral. That's where proactive and reactive customer service cross. So you can't tell me you have customer-centric content without listening to your customers. You are just sitting in a bubble or on a high going, we know what's best. Yeah. That's not customer-centric, that's you-centric. So it's really important to understand. So for instance, we have a blog we created about how we're never going to build a bridge between Victoria, BC and Vancouver, BC. It's never, ever, never, 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 ever, never, 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 never going to happen. But people bring it up every year. Oh, wouldn't it make our lives easier? Oh, yeah, it would also be the most expensive bridge ever made, the longest bridge ever made, the deepest tunnel ever built, on a fault line. Like, it's all these reasons it's never going to happen. But I know by creating that piece of content, not only is it, as I said in my podcast clip ages ago, Googleable, so that they don't pick up the phone, they don't tweet, because they Googled first bridges from Victoria to Vancouver, and they see our content at the top going, never, ever, never, 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 ever going to happen. But also it's our frontline staff who take that content and share it through emails, or they educate themselves through phone calls and so forth. So we are listening to what the public has to say through our interactions. Maybe there's repeated themes and questions about how not understanding how to drive around a roundabout. Okay, guess what? We need to do a video explaining how to drive around a roundabout. And that doesn't come from us thinking it's a good idea. We create that content based on what we're seeing from the public or the questions that they're not getting answered, so that we create that content so it is findable, so that we can also use it. And the funny thing is the content we wrote 7 years ago is as timeless as possible. We try to stay away from, you need to know this on Tuesday.
Okay.
We stick to stuff that's much more evergreen so that we can share it over the years over and over again. We get more traffic to content we wrote 7 years ago than the content we threw out this week. It might be just as popular, but then you get all these backlinks and you get references and you get your own internal organization understanding what content you have. The other flip side of content marketing has been onboarding. We have done an amazing job of creating content. This was not our intent when we started the blog, the videos, and the social media. We were all about educating the public around safety and the work we do. But then slowly over time, we learned that our own ministry, our own organization was using those social things as an onboarding tool to educate our own ministry about what we do for new staff and so forth. Couldn't be happier that that was also a resource for them. So yeah, content marketing has so many benefits, but if you have to do it right, and you have to incorporate the public in it or the customer in it. And that's where looking at it as not only reactive customer service, but proactive customer service. And content marketing is a cornerstone of that.
I think there's an important, we talk a lot about social public service, social media and things like, and interacting with public and tenants, or where I'm in a library today, patrons, I think they call them here, the library here, is all that fleeting information that's being shared out there, that the evergreen part of this, when you talk about a blog, you talked earlier about Flickr, it could be YouTube, it's your website, it could be your Instagram if somebody wants to go look through the grid of the Instagram, whatever it might, Pinterest, or it doesn't really matter. Just putting out tweets and Facebook messages and things like that is great. It's an important component of it, and interacting with people in near real time is hugely important for certain businesses and organizations. But that evergreen material that grows over time is equally as important. And as you said, even this podcast that we did 9 years ago has content, which I'm going to share on this podcast today in 2022. Absolutely relevant, hasn't aged a bit there, and people can learn from it, and they should be learning from it. And I think that's an important piece that is often overlooked, particularly by smaller businesses out there, that they don't know what tweeting, sending out Instagram photos or information out there, but they ignore the evergreen part of it. And they're missing, I believe, a huge piece, a huge potential. Question. My last question for you is my signature question I asked all my guests. Russel, what does innovation mean to you?
I hate that word so much. And the reason I hate that word is because nobody wants to define it. Sure, I can define it for you. And I find innovation is new ways of fixing old problems. That's how I'm going to define it. The reason I kind of hate it is because it's a buzzy word that is way overused in every industry. And we just throw it around without actually explaining what it means. And then when we define it, we get really loose and manipulative with that definition so it suits our needs. So I'm not a huge fan of the word innovation, only because I think it's been diluted so much as to what it actually could mean. But yeah, I think it's new ways of looking at fixing old problems. But I stress new, not tweaked, not iterative. But really new ways of looking at things. And when I think of innovation, I think of like how Netflix decimated the rental, the rental market, or Uber changed how the taxi industry works. Like that's innovation, not putting a link in the email signature. I'm innovative. Look, I put a link in my email signature. That's not it.
Sounds like
Sorry, I didn't mean to be negative about it. I loved innovation when it's treated properly, but I think that boat has sailed quite a while ago.
It sounds like you've been in numerous staff meetings somewhere. I'm not going to say in the ministry, wherever it may have been, where somebody at the table brought up, we're going to do something innovative next quarter, and you probably sunk under the table, said, I'm out of here.
I'll be honest, in my world, in my groups, it's not a word used very often. We're very operational. We're certainly looking at new ways of doing it, but for whatever reason, the word doesn't get used as much. It doesn't stop us from new ideas for old problems, but we just don't use the word as much, I think.
Probably
in my
could
world
be.
anyway.
So last thing, you are a fellow podcaster, having started, I believe, in early of 2022. Tell us about your podcast. And before you say that, anything we talked about, articles, tweets, everything that Russell's brought up here is in the show notes below here. Go ahead and click through them. Follow him on social media. All those things will be in the show notes here below. But tell us about your podcast. It has little, as I can tell, to do with infrastructure and transportation, right?
It does. Yeah, sure. I'll totally take advantage of this opportunity to first say I do a blog series called Social Public Service, which is about using social media in the public service, and that's a subsection of my blog. But yeah, that's just a little more pertinent to this conversation. The other is my podcast called Relationships at Work, the Employee Experience and Workplace Culture podcast, which is an opportunity for me to look at how we engage employees, how we can lead them, how we can value them. I lived and still live in the customer service realm and find it unbelievably vital. But I think a lot of organizations, and certainly from going to conferences of customer service, when I started talking about employees, your first customer, eyes kind of glazed over because everybody focuses on the customer because they can immediately see the connection to profit. Customer equals money equals importance, right? But I'm like, yeah, but guess who those customers talk to? Guess who those customers are building relationships with? Why aren't your employees happier? Why are they not more valued? And I think with the pandemic, and I think with things like the Great Resignation and stuff like that, I think long festering problems have become much more high profile. It's not like the employees suddenly go, I want better working conditions. That didn't suddenly happen. I want to be valued more. They just stopped putting up with bullshit. So I think that's more of what's happened. And I love learning. So I've had some amazing guests on that are really experts in this field, from mental health to plain language to dealing with negativity. And so Relationships at Work allows me to do that as a podcast host, not only about our relationships with other employees and as leaders, but also with ourselves, how we show up at work, how we are set to build those relationships with everybody else. Because if we're not in a good place, we're just going to bring a lot of bad stuff to work. So yeah, we're early days. I'm excited. We're only a couple episodes in, so if people want to jump in and catch up already, easy to do. But yeah, I've really loved doing this.
It's an interesting subject. I've had actually 2 guests in the last few months who have brought up the employee experience, and we talk about customer experience, even user experience, those sort of things we've been talking about for basically decades. But the employee experience, as you said, is a relatively new subject that is now taking the forefront. It's been there forever, but now you see EX all over the place, the employee experience. And I think it's really great that people are shining light on it.
Well, it's funny. I'm having sort of a quote unquote trolling fun with a lot of people that I admire on Twitter, and just changing their customer service tweets and making them employee experience tweets. Like, you can't serve the customer if you don't understand the customer. I'm like, okay. And I retweeted, you can't serve the employee without understanding the employee. It's exactly the same muscles, exactly the same way of, understanding it and focusing on the employee. Use those muscles internally and they'll better serve your customers. So yeah, I am passionate and in love with building better relationships. And I think there's tons about customers. So I'm doing my best to do and put the spotlight on employees with this podcast.
And I'm sure some of the content there will be evergreen, and 10 years from now, you'll be able to pull segments out.
All evergreen.
Play it again.
All evergreen.
It doesn't change. We're still humans at the end of the day. Russell, thank you from British Columbia, for me sitting currently in Florida, normally in Europe. Nice to see you again here. Of course, on the podcast, nobody's going to see you. Thank you for being here. Notes are all below. And I look forward to maybe connecting to you again live, maybe not in 9 years, perhaps more frequently. And good luck on your podcast.
This isn't video. My hair looks fantastic. But no, always a pleasure, Andrew, catching up with you.
Thank you. All right. That was fun.
Recording stopped.
Thank you. Wow, we went over the hour now. Sorry.
Yeah,
Hope you're okay.
I work about 8:39, so I'm good.
All right. That was fun.
How was that for you?
That was great. I put a little effort to coming up with some ideas of questions here, but I kind of thought we just riff on the subjects that we've been talking about for a long time. Some of it's a little depressing that we haven't made more progress in some areas, but I found this conversation really exciting to hear I've been watching from afar what TransBC is doing. I've been checking out some of the tweets, seeing what you've been writing there, and it's like, okay. Because I interact with a number of public organizations. This week, I'm working with the public library on what they might be able to do and how they can get information out.
Libraries are a buffet of opportunity to be online and social.
There is so much content, just
so much
all over right here. So that's why I'm podcasting from their building. I use their podcast studio early in the week for their director's interview that I'm trying to help create sort of stuff like that. So I think it's interesting to hear from your public infrastructure perspective that it can really work and it can really be important to the public and to the employees. You've got a team there over 10 years. That tells me that employee experience somehow works.
It does. I even do a podcast internally to the ministry as well. Right. It's not for the public. The public could learn something from it, but the audience is about educating our own ministry about what our ministry does. So I created a podcast about 3 years ago within our own ministry that sort of educates us on what we do. So it's a lot of fun. Just even that employee experience, culture, touchstone, I guess, as it is, object. Love that stuff. So good for you, man. I'm happy to connect and happy to have the conversation.
See you online. Stay safe. Find your shoes before you head back to the office there.
This is where I'm going to be all day. They don't need to know if I don't have shoes on.